Hello children, in our previous video we have seen what is transition and also the developments that are taken place in Europe. Okay, so in today's videos we'll be discussing in detail regarding the sources. When we say sources, it is an evident or it's a proof, okay, for the event that had taken place in the past. So without which we can't believe any or we can't trust on any event that had taken place. Okay, if we don't have a proper source for the history, so it merely becomes a story. Okay, so now the sources have been divided into two types. One is primary sources and the second one is secondary sources. Okay, so in primary sources there are sources that provide direct or first hand information about an event. So those sources we call it as a primary sources. Okay, so the official records also will be considered as the primary sources. Okay, for example, the papers of government agencies at different levels. Okay, so in those times East India Company had maintained a detailed account of the trading conditions because they have come to India for the trading purpose, right? So they have maintained all those trading conditions as an account in their books. Okay, so those records will be considered as the primary source. And also the British Crown, when it took over the reins of administration, when the power from East India Company had given to the hands of the British Crown, okay, they have a detailed account maintained in the official records. Okay, how the Indian administration had taken from the East India Company and handed over to the British Crown. The next one is records of European companies. Okay, when we say European companies, it is not only the Britishers who came to India for the purpose of trading. Okay, so there were countries like Portuguese, Dutch and French who have come for the trading purpose. Okay, so they also had maintained the records. These all records were used for the construction of history of the 17th and 18th century in India. They are important primarily from the point of view of economic history, but much can be gathered about the political setup in India at that time. Okay, so followed by the official records and then the European accounts, companies' accounts, we have contemporary literary works such as memories, biographies, travel accounts, which provide useful glimpses into the history of the period. Okay, so literary works written, the biographies. Okay, and then we have the travel accounts, the foreign travelers who have visited India, Huyen Sang. Okay, you can take the example, they have just written what they have observed in India. So based on those literary works we can rebuild the history what had happened in those period. Then we can take the newspapers, periodicals in English and Indian languages, printings, drawings, sketches, engravings of the period, photographs, films and audio and video tapes also becomes a primary source. Okay, the last one is archaeological sources. Okay, so till now we have seen the written source under the primary source. Okay, the archaeological sources will become the unwritten sources like buildings, monuments and the artifacts. The secondary informations or the secondary sources are produced by using the primary sources. So whereas the primary source provide first-hand information and the secondary sources involve generalization, analysis, critical interpretation of the original information. So whatever the information that they are giving is taken from the primary source. So we call it as a secondary sources. You can take the example of the textbook that you are reading. Okay, so it is also a secondary source where we have taken the sources from the primary source. Okay, we'll see regarding the Renaissance. Okay, so what is the meaning of Renaissance? Renaissance means rebirth or revival. Okay, so rebirth, beginning a new life in the European society. Okay, the people started reviving their past. Okay, so hence we say Renaissance means it's a rebirth or revival for the European nations. Renaissance began first in Italy in the 14th century. Okay, so in which country in Europe the Renaissance began for the first time? It is in Italy in 14th century, and later on it spread to the other countries of Europe. Okay, so this movement aimed at reviving the classical heritage of Europe from which it had been separated from almost 8 centuries. Okay, so now what is classical heritage of Europe means? It is the traditional restrictions or the traditional rules and regulations that they were following. Okay, so now they started reviving, they started bringing change in that classical heritage. There are some of the important features or characteristics of the Renaissance. Okay, so that has been followed in the Renaissance. We'll see what are those characteristics or the features of the Renaissance. The first one is humanism. Okay, so humanism means system of thought that considers solving human problems with the help of reason as more important than religious beliefs. Okay, so in simple understanding, if you say humanism means, here the people give more importance to human life than any other things. Okay, mainly religious beliefs. Okay, so they didn't give importance to the religious traditions that they were following, rather than the human life became more important. Okay, the next one is spirit of inquiry. Okay, so here during the Renaissance it taught the people to ask questions. Okay, why, how the things. Okay, yeah, when, how it happened. So the people started asking questions, and thereby they got many new ideas and new answers to their questions. Okay, so Renaissance produced a spirit of inquiry and a sense of curiosity. Okay, so during this period we see many scientists who have started studying about the earth, studying about the solar system. Okay, so we see Galileo, Copernicus, who had said that the earth is not in flat shape but rather it is round in shape. Okay, so the people started discovering many new things. It's all because when they started questioning. Okay, so this spirit of inquiry promoted the scientific approach, and people began to reason before arriving at a conclusion. So before believing blindly, they started reasoning out. Okay, so for everything they wanted a reason, so thereby their knowledge started improving. They started gaining knowledge about what they are and what the surrounding is. Okay, so the next point is rationalism. The scholars of the Renaissance period are known as rationalists. Okay, they rejected all based on superstitions. Okay, they rejected the thoughts and the ideas which are based on the superstitions. Okay, so even today also we advise no superstitious beliefs, right? Yeah, so they questioned the authority of the church. Okay, so mainly they asked the questions against the church, why this has to be followed, for what reason. Okay, they refused to follow its teachings and authorities blindly. Okay, so this one is glorification of human form. Okay, so the most important features, the Renaissance scholars and artists glorified human body. Okay, so especially the artists, those who draw, okay, they started giving the human form to the characters that they have come across in the Bible. Okay, so students, that's all for today. We'll continue in our next video regarding the impact of Renaissance. Go through the video. If you have any doubts or queries, you can ask me.